Hello, it's Natalie and welcome to a new home card inspired by the Sizzix Paper Village die set. So that's number 664741, and this is a collaboration video with itscheaperthanTherapy.com. So here's the dies, and you can see you get a really good selection to build lots of different houses, so you can mix and match. We're going to go for the medium die. And you can see that we can slot in different windows to create different types of buildings. So you can make it look like a church, little house, a school. Lots of ways that you can use these. So today we're going to just build a little house. And to do that we can pop in different windows. So I'm just working out which layout I want to use. So I'm going to use some copper card that I've backed with some self-adhesive sheet. This is going to reinforce our foil paper a little and also make it into a little sticker, so it's really easy to apply to our surface. So I've already put the outside of our house, and then we can choose our windows. So you can see we have several different options for windows that we can play with, and then when you're happy you can stick it all down with a little bit of masking tape so that your dies don't move. Now I'm not worrying about the side panel that's going to cut because we won't be using that, so I'm just going to stick my tape over the top, and I'm just using a little bit of Sticks to low tack masking tape. And I'm just going to feed that through my Gemini. And then we can create our roof section. So here's our little house being released, and you can see the double-sided adhesive that's already been applied to the foil. Okay. And what I love about Rinea when you die cut it is that you do get this lovely embossed finish. So you'll notice I'm keeping all my dies on a magnetic sheet, so I don't lose any of the dies as I'm working with these, as some of them are very small. So that's a top tip, so that you don't lose pieces on your desk. So you can really see how much that embosses. And we're going to cut off the side panel, and you can just follow the score line for that, so that you keep a nice neat edge. And we're going to do the same to the glue tabs at the top, which is where you would normally adhere the roof. Try not to go all the way to the end of the scissor when you're cutting to avoid damaging your foil.
Is this all that you dreamed it be?
So now we have a piece of the chocolate foiled paper.
With me, you could have gone anywhere, been anyone.
And rather than cutting a roof for this one with the dies that are included in the kit, what we're going to do is we're going to adhere our little house to our chocolate foil. and then we can trim round. So if you want to pop a different colour in the windows, this is the point to do it. So I'm using my pokey tool to get that backing off, as it's quite fiddly once it's been die cut, but once you start to peel off a little bit, you'll find it's really easy to get the rest off. And there we go. So once you get that first piece going, and then peel it gently off the back. Now do go careful round by the door, because you don't want to accidentally pull it off. As this piece is going to be going flat on our card, we don't need to worry about our doorway still being able to open and close. So we can stick that straight down. If you want to see the boxes made into their 3D format, you can actually see another project that I've done over on the blog, where I've actually built the house. So now I'm going a little bit extra over the end and around the top, so that we can see that chocolate for the roof. Again, you want to go very careful not to get to the end of the scissors, just to avoid any damage to the foil. I'm going to take it back towards the house and then trim down that cut edge. And there you go, we have a little house. So you could repeat that with the school, the church, for a wedding card. It's a really easy way of using your dies in a different way. So now we're going to bring in our next piece that we want to cut. So I want to bring in some of the ebony Starstruck foiled paper into the design. So far we can work with the Earth Tones pack entirely for this card. So you don't have to apply the self-adhesive onto the back of this one if you don't want to, but it will help if your die that you choose for your background is particularly fiddly.
Is this all that you dreamed it be?
So as I want to work slightly over and slightly under the die, in this case I decided to just leave it without double-sided adhesive, so it's easier when actually assembling the card. Make sure that you have your Starstruck the right way up as well when you're using your die cutting, so that you get a nice neat finish on the front. And we're just going to use some of the same masking tape. Assemble your sandwich, check that nothing's moved, and then feed it in through your die cutting machine. I'm using a Gemini cutting machine, but any die cutting machine will use these dies. Okay, so you want to be really gentle when you're removing this one, just because we have a few fiddly bits and pieces. If you have any areas that are particularly stubborn, you can use a fine glue applicator, which is like a little felt applicator, or you can use a pokey tool to just put through the release holes in the die. The other thing is that with some detail dies you'll find that some of your foiled paper will get embedded in your cutting plate. You can usually just flick these out with a little pokey tool like I'm doing here. You can also soak your cutting pads if you have a particularly large amount of foiled paper or other paper stuck in them, and that will bring them back to being nice and clean again. So you do want to look after your cutting plate so that you get a nice impression each time that you're cutting. So you can see here we have our really detailed die cut. And I'm starting by popping out the waste. Then when your die cut releases, you can gently remove it from the die. Work your way around, especially with this one where you've got lots of fiddly little pieces. You can just pop the rest of the waste out of the die, and that just helps you have a nice clean cut the next time you come to use it. So I do tend to try and keep my dies as clean as possible. If you look after them, your dies will last you ages. Okay, so now we're ready to assemble our card. So here's our house and our background. And I'm going to bring in a foiled card blank. So as this already had some foiling on the background, it was really interesting to try and work out how I wanted to actually lay out the card. So when I'm doing this, I'm constantly thinking, where is my sentiment going to go? How big can it be? Does that work in terms of layout for travelling the eye through your card design? Which is what you should be looking for when you're doing your card layout. So I'm going to use the Kelly Creates Foil Quill USB to add the sentiment. So this could be that you could laser print it onto your card blank, or if you have a foil quill you can foil it onto your card blank and match that foiling that's already there, or you can draw it on with a pen. So in this case I drew it on with a pen, and then filled with the Jane Davenport gold pen to complete the lettering. If ever you fancy practicing your hand lettering skills, this is a good way to do it.
But you've taken a chance on me. Now we're building bridges as far as the eye can see. And I never thought I'd find anything close to all that I knew you would be. Ain't it beautiful?
So now we're going to peel that adhesive backing off our house. So again, like before, you may find it a little bit tricky just to get started, but once you're there, it's nice and easy. Just go careful with the two tabs on the roof, so you can see there it's left a little bit behind. So I'm going to position my house. I'm going to flick that arch up and over the top, and then begin to stick it back to that top section. Try not to jump when you're doing this. It can be a bit fiddly. So you can see I'm just pressing it up to the top of that roof. And I'm gently going to unstick my fingers. And you can stick the house down. So at this point, our background is still not glued. So you just want to concentrate on positioning the house so it's level, and then you can always adapt to that background a little after. You have a certain leeway for movement, as you can see here when I'm just getting that in place. So hopefully you can see now where I say that the double-siding in this particular background, because of that overlapping and underlapping, is particularly tricky, so you won't necessarily want to use the double-sided adhesive. So I'm just adding on some little tiny glue dots. And I'm using Sizzix 3D PVA in a fine tip applicator, because less is definitely more when it comes to using this glue. Now another top tip for you while that's setting, just apply a little stamp block over the top with a weight on top, and that's going to hold everything down while it's setting. Or you can press it down if you need a little extra pressure to get it where you want it to go. So with the Sizzix 3D PVA, it sets reasonably quickly. But if there's anywhere that you just think just needs that little extra help, you can always put another tiny dot in and repeat the same. Yeah. So you're going to allow that to set until it's dry, and then we can finish off the card with a little ink blending.
But you've taken a chance on me.
So I'm going to fold the card in half. Now this is a pre-scored card blank, so that is quite easy. If you're scoring your card blank by hand, then do use a hoogie board or something similar. just to help guide that score line so it's nice and straight. So I'm going to use 2 distress inks, Carved Pumpkin and Rusty Hinge. So Rusty Hinge is the first colour that we're going to be using. And I'm using a nice big blending brush on my splodge mat. And I'm going to tap off a bit of that colour first and then gently rotate around that edge. So this is going to pick up on the warmer tones in our foiled paper. And I always find ink blending just finishes off a card with a touch of polish. And it just helps blend all those elements together so they look like they're all meant to be there.
Is this all that you
So I'm just going around every edge, including your folded edge. So when you get to the folded edge, just go a little bit more gently as you approach that fold, as it is obviously a bit more of a bump.
You could have gone anywhere, been anyone. You stole my heart.
Now don't go with too wetter of a blending brush over your foiling, otherwise you can get like a double shadow effect, which is a bit strange. But your foiling is going to act as a mask, so everything that you would usually do with masking, you want to be doing with your foiling.
I never thought I'd find anything close to all that I knew you would be. Ain't it beautiful?
So originally I wasn't going to do this too dark, but I actually really like these darker corners. So I'm going to do those a little bit more. And I'm really happy with how that came out. So if you want to see more that I've done with these dies, then you can also have a look at the blog, where I've done a little snow globe effect card. So if you're looking for a project that's a little bit more tricky, then that's the one to have a look at. This one's nice and simple and a good place to get you started. So take care for now, and I'll see you next month. Bye!
Not much for change.